the equation E is equal mc square, in which energy is put equal to mass multiplied with the square of the velocity of light, showed that very small amount of mass may be converted into a very large amount of energy, and vice versa. The mass and energy were in fact equivalent, according to the formula mentioned above. This was demonstrated by Kropotkin and Walton in 1932 experimentally.
You've got it right here. S4 with E squared in conjunction with Spaced Out Radio.
Alien contact. S4. UFOs. Bigfoot. 9/11. Grays. The Illuminati. Cover-ups. RH negative blood. What are they hiding from
Sorry, your call cannot be completed as dialed.
Now, the men behind the mics, Forest Moon Paranormal's Eric Cooper and the SOR Spacewire's Eric Marco. You can find more at spacedoutradio.com.
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
Now, let's travel into the universe. It's S4 with E squared.
God, I love that. I just love our intro, and I know a whole lot of other people do too. Yeah,
I love it.
Dave. We got Dave in here now too.
He's showing up on my Skype panel.
Hi.
Hi, Dave.
There
Hi.
you are. All right.
How's your beard?
My beard is good. I'm tugging on it right now just for you.
Perfect.
All righty. So here we are, S4 of E squared, for our second episode under the Spaced Out Radio banner. Outstanding. So how's everyone doing tonight?
They're doing all right.
All right.
I am good. Thank you for having me on with you guys.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Dave. Always a pleasure. And I don't get news, but from what I have gathered on Facebook news, it has been a quiet day for the anniversary of 9/11 of this country.
Yeah, I was wondering if anything would happen, but apparently not. Of course, I imagine the alert status is pretty high.
Yeah, and I mean, I do get alert statuses on the phone, and it's nothing's going on, and that's outstanding. No active alerts in the area. Ironically enough, we've had three going from not getting called out for the last 3 years. We've had 3 search and rescue call outs in a week, and well, two of them were standbys. Then we had a call out actually Tuesday, in which I raised heck because of the fact that my team has not been called out in 3 years. And so I think that's going to change rather drastically because when it comes to a missing person, they can use all the teams they can. And the politics has a lot to play in that. So For those that haven't heard about Paracon is now October 22nd. It's only going to be a one-day event because of our venue, and we're not playing games with people, so we are sticking to a venue that hopefully gets locked in the next few days. Nothing's going to change as far as the quality of the speakers and the topics, so I just want to reassure people of that. You got your topics together, Dave?
I'm working on it. I'm slowly working on it. It'll be ready to go by the time I get down there to speak at the Forest Moon Paracon, which will be really good.
Outstanding. And for our Forest Moon members, I am working on a new network plan. I'm looking for a point of contact I can have in each state and each country that will, like I said, be a point of contact. Your job as the POC of your state is going to be to contact all paranormal groups in your state. And if you want me to vet them and make sure they're what we're looking for a crisis team, you would be basically the state case manager, and I would contact you when we have a case in your state, along with our own astral team. That way we have boots on ground everywhere we are, and we have people that we can trust that can go handle the cases. So that's in the works. So 9/11. Tonight we're not actually. I don't give a damn really about the actual conspiracy theories, and we're not going to discuss how the buildings fell or what if not there were airplanes. There's enough people that actually witnessed that event that saw airplanes. And understanding videos can be doctored and all that crap, but you know, whether it was or was not a conspiracy, the numbers I looked at today, you've got 2,977 people that died and are still dying from cancer and other health-related issues from that event that happened today, 15 years ago, and 6,000 plus that were injured. And out of the 6,000 that were injured, that doesn't even count the PTSD these people suffered through.
Well, I don't think I mean, there's some things you can fake, but two buildings collapsing and all that ash. I'm not on board with the people who think it was all faked. I mean, there's just no way. And
No.
I've actually heard people stand flat-footed on the ground and say it was a demolition and that it was all like Hollywood smoke and mirrors. And I'm sorry. I'm willing to believe our government is somewhat evil at times, but I don't think they could carry that off, to be honest.
Here's my thoughts on it, and they're irrelevant. It was an event that happened 15 years ago, and here's where I stand. No, it's not a conspiracy. It is a very corrupt government that I do believe knew it was going to happen and let it happen. That's where I would stand now, and that shows but you're looking at going back to last week's show with Bohemian Grove. You're looking at people that go through Bohemian Grove and all the crap they do there. I mean, so these are some very dark, evil people. So would they allow 2,000, almost 3,000 people to die? I have no doubt they would.
Right.
So when it comes down to it, we're going to talk facts. These are facts that I know for a fact because I was active duty military at the time. And yeah. Now, why would a government allow this to happen? That's what you got to ask. And I know you've seen the pictures. The Bushes were friends with the Bin Ladens. And what's funny about that, and it's not funny, but you've seen the pictures, and the day it happened, all flights were grounded. And the only flight that went out was the bin Laden family going back to Saudi Arabia.
That was convenient.
Isn't it? What are your thoughts, Dave? I know you're sitting there listening.
That was just one of those weird events that it didn't. I was going through my own personal tragedy that day, so this was just something that was going on in the background, and it didn't seem real. My dad called, told me to turn on the TV and see what was going on in the world, and I turned on, and it's like, for a moment there, I caught there just as they were replaying the airplane hitting, the first airplane hitting the tower, and I was like, what the? I mean, it just didn't make sense. It was really, I don't know, it was one of those really weird, surreal moments that didn't seem to have any reality to it till somewhat after the fact. When the aftermath started coming in, they're showing the dust clouds, the people, the wreckage. Then it lost some of the video game disaster movie connotation that it had with me. Then it was more real. But the day it happened, like I said, I had my own thing going on, and it was something that was going on in the background.
Exactly. Now, I was in Germany, and it's very surreal because we were setting up. I was actually an NCO on a detail setting up tents for an expert field medical badge competition that was about to go on, and we got all these tents set up. We were about to, do the fine tuning of it and whatnot, and it was about, I want to say 3:30 German time, which is 9 hours ahead, I think. I don't know. I haven't been in Germany in years, but all of a sudden, here comes the senior NCO in charge of the whole thing, saying, "We got a formation. Something's going on. Everyone, get over here now." And it was just the tone of his voice that, really. And we got in formation, and of course, the initial reports, we were told the White House was hit. We were told the Pentagon was hit. They really didn't know what was going on because you're talking AFN News Network or AFN TV in Germany. We were told everyone's got to report back to their company ASAP. We're going on straight lockdown. As soon as it happened, our tanks were rolling through Kitzingen. They blocked off every city street. The Germans were panicked because they didn't know what the hell was going on. But we locked down the town of Kitzingen, Germany. And I know every base in Germany probably did the same thing. And so we were in our company probably till about 3-4 in the morning, finding out details, finding out what we were supposed to do. They locked our base down. Now, here's where I find ironic, in that just hours after the towers got hit, there were explosions going off in Afghanistan. Now, I know you know how long it takes to activate a unit and get a unit into a combat mission. It takes a lot longer than, say, 6 hours, which really raises it raises red flags for me, in that we already have people planted in Afghanistan. That's before the Afghanistan war started. So we have pre-planted military in Afghanistan because we know it's going to happen. That's where the red flags come in for me. One of many. But all of a sudden we started hearing about, it's bin Laden. He claimed it, and now we're going to attack Afghanistan. Okay, that's all fine and good. Let's get the country all riled up. Let's get the country in. Let's look at the tone of the country. the tone of the country went very angry and very patriotic real quick. You look at it then and you compare it to now. Actually, you look at it then and you compare it to about 2 years later. And
Right.
it went from a very patriotic, let's go kick some ass, the eagle is pissed off, yada, 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 to let's bring our boys home.
Right. I think what has always been strange to me is this whole Gulf War thing. Okay, World War II, we knew we were in a war. World War I, I mean, the home front was involved with every war. Vietnam, the last time we were really into something, there was, whether you were pro-war or anti-war, there was something going on. This has been like a reality series. We've been dicking around over there for 15 friggin' years, not getting anything accomplished other than pissing half the world or more off at us. And here at home, it's like, yeah, there's a war going on over there. People died. It's like, it's the detachment, a social detachment from it. Except for me, I've got a kid bobbing around in the middle of the Indian Ocean, or probably out in the Med somewhere, Indian Ocean, circling around the Med on a guided missile cruiser. And I've got 2 others that at any moment we could get a call from Florida that my wife has to run down there because they're both getting deployed through the Air Force. So, unless you're a military family, I don't think this war has had any impact on the average person sitting around the house, other than, you don't even see that much on the news about it anymore. And so, unless something particularly heinous happens.
Well, here, let me give you an example of patriotism. So I'm in Balad, Iraq, and I get, and I'm going to go through the phases of what it takes for us to get. I'll use Telefar, for example. I was in Telefar 05 to 06. I'll get back to Balad here in a second. But we get 2 weeks of free R&R. That's free leave. It takes a month because I'm sitting in Telefar. I have my leave paperwork. I have my orders to go home for 2 weeks, whatnot. I have to catch a helicopter from Telefar to Mosul, Iraq, where my battalion is, so I can get them to sign some more paperwork. Then I get to sit in Mosul for 2 or 3 days waiting for an airplane that's going to take me to Kuwait. And finally, I get bumped up and I get excited because I'm going to get on this airplane that's going to take me to Kuwait. Then I get to Kuwait. I get to go through some more briefings and sign some more paperwork. And finally, 3 or 4 days later, I get to fly from Kuwait to, in my case, because they only had 3 port calls, depending on where you were going on leave. Well, my port call was in Dallas, Texas. So I finally, after 3 or 4 days of sitting in Kuwait, bored off my ass waiting to go home, I get on an airplane. And it was kind of cool. I've never experienced this before, but we're talking, the country was still at its infancy of patriotism. And so we land in Dallas, and fire trucks meet us, and they give us the hero's welcome with the water going over the airplane and whatnot. And we finally get out of the airplane and walk into the terminal, and you've got hundreds. I mean, I guess Texas is probably the most patriotic, I think, of most of the states. But I get off the airplane, and I've got people saying, "Do you smoke?" And I've got like every brand of cigarette thrust into my face. And I'm like, well, okay, cool. I'll take advantage of it, I guess. Whatever. And
beats being spit on.
Well, yeah. Oh, no, hands down. I mean, I feel for our Vietnam veterans, hands down. But okay, so I've got 20 lighters thrust at me to light my cigarette, and then I have about 30 cell phones handed to me. You want to call your family and let them know you landed safely? And I mean, that's probably the most, I guess, patriotic I've ever seen the country. and then I finally landed in Seattle, and I've still got people even in Seattle going, "Oh, wow, you coming back from Iraq?" I'm like, yeah, but I'm going back in 2 weeks. But yeah, and so then going back, it takes another, the exact same opposite of what I just went through. I fly from Seattle to Dallas, fly from Dallas to Kuwait, wait for an airplane. And it literally, a 2-week leave takes a month. And let's see, Donna wants to know, do we believe our government knew it was going to be so bad? Yeah, I do. Because I think that was the part of the whole plan. Because what was the outcome of 9/11? The outcome of 9/11 was the Patriot Act.
Right.
And the Patriot Act is the worst of evils for any kind of document. It gives them permission to snoop in your life. And if you remember, too, back then, they were actually telling your neighbors to spy on you. And I mean, really? And
Well, it sounds like German Gestapo tactics and Russian KGB. I mean, that's like a playbook right out of two of the most oppressive, well, what we're told are two of the most oppressive regimes ever. I was watching this happen, and I was like, my God, this is just like a page out of a World War II history book.
Exactly. Now, I'm gonna backtrack here for a second, because so after 9/11, we went into straight lockdown for about 6 months. They set up tents. They set up. We went through EOD training where we had to inspect vehicles with mirrors and whatnot. And any vehicle coming onto our base was stopped. Had to go through a checkpoint. I was pulled actually before I even got put on that, because I was sergeant of the guard for our base, gate guard. But then, so my daughter caught a school bus from Kitzigan to her school in Würzburg. Now they're scared for our kids that their kids are going to be attacked, while they're on their way to school. So I was actually riding our DOD kids' school buses with full rattle, and a loaded M16. And I did that for about 2 weeks. And they actually did have a couple scares where they thought they saw an Arab following the school bus around. Well, gee, come to find out, it was just a mom trying to get her kid to the same school we were going to, And so there you go. Any Arab must be a terrorist. And that's kind of where that whole thought process started, was 9/11. Never mind the fact that, I went through maintenance school in AIT, which, for those that don't know, that's where all soldiers in the Army, anyway, it's like an advanced, oh God, what is it? Advanced, it's basically your job training. I've been through medical school, maintenance school. I've got 2 different MOSs, which are military occupational specialties. We had foreign soldiers that were going to the same school we were. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard the conspiracy theory, which is not a conspiracy, it's fact, of the School of America at Fort Benning, Georgia, and that's where we actually trained terrorists. Bin Laden was there, Saddam was there. It's actually on Fort Benning, Georgia. And so we train foreign militaries all the time, whether it's in maintenance, whether it's in medical. It doesn't matter. We have the Japanese Army that comes to Fort Lewis every other year to test out their weapons and their equipment. So just the fact that you see foreign militaries here doesn't mean it's a conspiracy, and it does not mean they're threatening our country. But if you really look pre 9/11, you didn't see so much hatred towards Muslims. You still with me?
Yeah, I was thinking that because, well, even it depends on the city you're in, because I started working. I was a travel tech for a while. You do so many 13-week contracts at different hospitals around the country. And on 9/11, about, it would have been 2010, 2008-ish, somewhere in there. I was starting my first day at the Washington Hospital Center in D.C. And of course, they were mentioning, and 9/11 was still, fairly fresh in our consciousness at the time. They were spending a little bit of extra time that day talking about security and everything. But once you get inside, got past the orientation, that lab was like a microcosm of the world. We had Somalis, you had Muslims, you had pagans, you had Christians. Yeah. There were probably at least 9 to 10 different cultures working in that lab. And the only two that didn't get along were the Somali girl and the one from Eritrea, because at that very time, or Ethiopia, there was a lot of crap going on. The UN had sent Ethiopian troops into Somalia. And these two kind of butted heads over that. But as far as, one of my best friends was Anwar Khan, devout Muslim. That's how we got to being friends. I was teamed up with him during Ramadan because he had no set time he can eat. He's on a fast, right. So
he's
I did not mind working around that because, I understood, this guy hasn't had anything to eat all day. As soon as the sun goes down, man, he's wanting to jump in the break room and eat something. So, and my being understanding and then asking a few other questions regarding whether he went by the traditional when is sundown or by the scientific when is sundown, which was a debate going on at the time in that community. One thing led to another. Anwar and I became pretty tight friends while I was there. Mm-hmm. You're not, I don't know if that would happen today. I think it's gotten so much worse since then. Because of some of the, like out in California where those people had a baby shower thrown for them and then they went and killed the people through the shower for them. I don't know.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Now, going to Somalia real quick. When we got our orders for Somalia, it was supposed to be originally in '93. It was going to be a humanitarian aid mission. We were an ambulance company, a combat ambulance, never mind. But we were on orders to go actually help provide aid, and so the Marines did their beach landing. Of course, CNN had their lights on the beach, and oh look, here they come, and we shot the lights out and all that crap. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of Somalia just because, it bothers me talking about. That's where my PTSD stems from. But I actually, in Desert Storm and for Somalia, I actually had to swear and raise my right hand to go because of the fact that I'm a sole survivor. I'm an only child. And actually in Desert Storm, which it wasn't Desert Storm when I went. We'll backtrack real quick again because in '91, I was in the 11th Armored Cavalry. And we went basically after Desert Shield, Desert Storm, June of '91, and like 2 weeks after they signed the ceasefire, they activated our Cav regiment to go take over. Everybody else went home. We were there simply to keep Saddam from coming back. And we also did a whole lot of top secret stuff that I don't even know what they did because I was a medic for the headquarters, so I stayed and did routine medical stuff. But the medics that went out with the tanks were sworn to secrecy, and I don't know what they did. They went into Iraq at that point in time, and that was in '91. Donna, hit refresh. Well, yeah, somebody tell Donna to hit refresh. And
I just did.
Okay, because I know from my end we're doing fine. But I know our tanks, and I heard my buddies told me they would go across the desert and they'd see little flags in the sand. Oh, that's a minefield. So they'd, oh my God, stop, and they would actually have to backtrack. And for anyone that's not familiar with an M113, that is basically a steel box on tracks, and that's what we use for ambulances. And yeah, driving them is very tedious, and they had to actually back up their 113s and tanks in the same tracks they were in, and we actually had M1 Abrams that came back and would, when they were washing their tanks at night, would find landmines attached to the bottom of their tanks that fortunately did not go off. And yeah, so anyway, that was Operation Positive Force is what I was in there. And that was my first combat experience, and I was probably about 22. And for a 22-year-old, never really having been away from home, going to a combat zone. And okay, that's what, yeah. I actually had to raise my right hand and swear on the flag, or basically swear in that I wanted to go. Because I was an only child and they weren't going to take me, and I was like, you ain't going without me. My buddies are going, I'm going. There's no way in hell. So I went, and same thing in Somalia. They weren't going to take me, and I was like, no, my best friends are going to Somalia. I'm going too. You can suck it up. And so we land in Mogadishu, and we're pulled into formation and said, look, our mission's changed. Bullets are flying. We're having sniper attacks, RPGs, grenades. Matter of fact, driving to the university where we were going to be staying, there was a Kevlar sitting in the middle of the road. And my buddy's driving along. We're driving. We see this Kevlar sitting in the middle of the road. He's like, I should hit it. I'm like, no. Take a look around. There's a bunch of kids, and they're all watching this Kevlar. If a kid saw a Kevlar in the middle of the road, he'd be running out to grab it. Don't hit that.
Right.
And you know, fortunately, no one and everybody in our convoy went around it, and the explosive underneath it blew up that night. But that was our first taste of Somalia. Not to mention the Somali kids. You hear the word slingshot in America, you think of, two sticks with a rubber band. The kids in Somalia use a slingshot, and it's just like David and Goliath. It's basically a piece of cloth that they swing over their heads and release the rock, and they're dead accurate because they hit a couple of our guys in the back of a moving 5-ton. So yeah. Now, the thing with Somalia, it was basically a gang war. Aidid was one of the leaders. Yep. And to get his people on his side, he dropped all kinds of leaflets that the Americans were there to steal all the fish out of the Indian Ocean. That was one of them. Yeah. And I'll admit, I did go fishing, but it wasn't to steal all the fish out of the ocean. And, yeah. But
well, one of the things that gets you there is so many of the coastal people, that's what they did for, that they were griping because they saw the big factory ships from Japan, some of the other these big factory ships coming through and sucking up a lot of the fish. So he was cagey. Aidid was cagey to say, we're there to steal the fish, because that was already a hot button issue with the people.
Mm-hmm.
And face it, there's some low information people, because they're eating dirt for the most part, because they're not going to Walmart and buying a cheap sandwich. They're either starving or they're eating crap that would kill us. And they're not trying to keep up with current events other than what's the street chatter. So yeah, that was pretty smart of him to tie us into that.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the other topic I wanted to bring up, is the fact that none of your terrorists, none of your, they're not stupid. You sit and you think of an insurgent. You'll put on suicide, but you put on vest. You walk into a building, you blow yourself up. No, it ain't like that. They're not stupid. Think of guerrilla warfare. They're very smart in what they do, and we'll get to that with Iraq here shortly. Because what I'm about to talk about tonight, I shocked a lot of Americans when I was home at R&R telling them some of the stuff that was going on, and the news ain't gonna tell you nothing, because the news is government controlled, and they're gonna tell you what you want to hear, or what the government wants you to hear. But touching on Somalia real quick, basically what was going on in some regards is a drug called khat. And I know you and I have talked about this off the air on SOAR, just between you, me, and Dave. And so a lot of our listeners haven't actually heard any of this. But khat is basically a tree stick. It looks like a branch. So you've got all these Somali people, and they're smiling and waving, and they're friendly until about noon. And about noon, you start seeing the khat dealers with this big bundle of sticks. You see someone here with a big bundle of sticks, you're thinking firewood. Over there, it's a drug. It's a very adrenaline pumping drug, and it makes them crazy. And so after about 12, here, the same people that were smiling and waving at you are shooting at you. And we're talking, I've seen Thompson machine guns. I've seen, I went out with EOD once, and it's the only time I've ever had an ambulance stuck, and I was trying to go over a sand dune to make sure there were no kids in the area before the EOD blew up their weapon stash. And we're 5 miles away, and we've still got RPGs and bombs and whatnot that are flying over our heads from the blast. And so, yeah. And it's funny how many people back then, you say Somalia, and they're like, "Where's that at? Are you serious?" So we've got a UN berets on, because about a week before we left, and we were there from January to May of '93. We were with the first wave in. Black Hawk Down happened in about October. I bought that movie, and it took me about a year to actually sit down and watch it, and I was in tears watching it. If you want to see how Somalia was, watch Black Hawk Down. And I think my favorite actor in that movie, or my favorite character in that movie, is the Delta Force guy, and his speech at the very end of the movie hit me hard, because that's exactly how most of us feel, is that we don't do it for our damn government, we do it for the soldier next to us. And that's right. Dead accurate. That's dead accurate for most soldiers, is they don't give two shits about the government telling us to go. And I have a hard time in that I went to Iraq for what? It really wasn't, and it wasn't at all to keep the peace back here. Because honestly, if Saddam was still alive and running his country, you wouldn't see as many terrorists coming here. And I firmly believe that.
No. There's a reason that brutal dictators are the rule of thumb over there. It takes a brute. I don't want to sound racist, but I'm sorry. There's just not. It seems like they're not on the same wavelength as the rest of the planet, maybe not as psychologically mature. You've been there, maybe you know. It just seems like there's, I mean, we do, if you're an American, for example, and you open up and there's an editorial cartoon about Jesus, you don't go out and shoot up a building.
No.
And
Not
I
at all.
see I see that that's a culture that reacts stronger to external stimuli than others.
Let's take this from a different perspective, though. If you might see a different reaction if you say you saw a Middle Easterner drawing a picture of Jesus, because who was drawing the picture of Muhammad or of Allah? It was the Western society. It's the Western. They don't particularly hate. They hate Western civilization because what do we have and what do we flaunt? Yeah, and like I've explained before, as a pagan, they found it amazing that there was an American over there that wasn't a Christian, because they think everybody here is a Christian. They think everybody here is rich. They think everybody here is. You have to look at it from a Middle Eastern perspective that's maybe somewhat brainwashed, yeah. But they're not their intelligence level is not any lower. Some of your best doctors here come from the Middle East.
Oh. They also had more advanced medicine back when my people were painting themselves blue, jumping out of the woods and stabbing Roman soldiers in the groin and in the what's now British Isles. I mean, they already had come across a lot of biology that we didn't get discovered again for hundreds of years after. They were advanced astronomers. They had a amazing culture until you get to the point where there was the religious and the secular, and the religious won out. And that now, surely only the Quran is your source of truth. The science crap has got to go. And it was like somebody just reached out and snuffed out the brightest life or the brightest light in the world at that time. And you'd immediately get from a more or less a age of enlightenment back to a dark age, just because now we have to be strict. We have to strictly interpret reality by the book, the Quran.
Well, and that's the other point, or that's another point, is just about every war that's been fought has been fought over religion. People have to have something to believe in. I understand that. But when your religion is dictating that it's the only one true way, which is Islam and which is Christianity, then you have issues. And when people get radicalized enough to go kill in the name of their one true way, well, that's where the problem lies. And people get really mad because I'll say there's just about as many radical conservatives as there are radical Muslims or Islams, because you just don't hear about it so much. But look at all the you had the one, for example, that shot up a Planned Parenthood. You heard about that for 2 or 3 days, and he was doing it in the neoconservative. So you don't hear about it because it's not labeled a terrorist action. It's labeled just a disgruntled individual, or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. But
redefine the. Yeah, you have to redefine if you don't want to say what it is.
But let it be a brown skinned guy, and oh my God, it's a terrorist action. So Oh yeah, Trip, and I have no problem, and I piss people off all the time because there is many conservative extremism as there is Muslim, and I get into this argument all the time, and I get called stupid, I get called, I get called all kinds of names, but I was raised Christian, and I even went to Jim Oswego Bible College for a semester, and you want to talk about some radical ideology. They're just as radical as Muslims. But anyway, we're kind of getting off topic, but it is still a topic of what we're discussing. So we'll get off Somalia now. The reason I bring up Somalia is because looking at bin Laden, if you want to blame bin Laden for it, I think he was fueled to take charge of this, possibly by the Bushes, which is why his family was flown out the day it happened. But bin Laden was a young man during Desert Storm, and he saw America come flying in, to save the day. Here comes America, going to save the day. Word on Saddam lookalikes, I believe they were probably all killed, Trippin', to be honest with you. He had 16 different lookalikes that actually had plastic surgery. And yeah, they would be the front car. You'd have more in the back car, and Saddam might be in the middle one day, and then another day Saddam might be in the front. They switched it up. And the thing about Saddam, and I know I'm getting sidetracked, but that's okay, because we might go till 10 just because we got off to a late start. But going to Saddam and having talked to Iraqis that actually worked for Saddam, if he got pissed off or he woke up on the wrong side of bed, he would kill his entire cabinet and replace them, to the point where nobody wanted to work for the man. He was a true dictator. And again, he went to the School of America. I actually talked to one Iraqi that was in blood, because they come in $1 a day, and they would be set for the entire month. I mean, rent, food for the family, the whole 9 yards. They come and work for the U.S. For $1 a day, digging ditches, doing whatever the hell we needed done. And I talked to one that actually, I believe it was his brother. One of Saddam's sons actually liked this man's wife, wanted this man's wife to be his own, and so he killed her husband and took the wife. And I mean, that's the whole family. Yeah, I believe he had 2 sons. They've both been killed. But yeah, his sons were more radical than he was. And
no, he was just following old school Muslim practice. I mean, and if you even go back into the Old Testament of the Bible, wasn't it one of David's wives was one of his commander's wives, and he sent the guy to the front line to get killed so he could marry her. It's like, there's precedent.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So actually, they went by their culture, because I mean, hell, the Old Testament was based in the Middle East when it comes to continent.
Right.
So
if you look at the Quran, the Torah, and the Old Testament, and they're damn near the same book up until you get to the prophets, and that's whose prophet came out on top depends on whether you're a Jew who's still waiting, a Muslim who had Muhammad, or a Christian that had Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that much as far as him being a CIA operative. I could Google it, but I don't trust a whole lot of Google. Tonight I'm talking about what I know for fact. So I can't vouch for that, Trippin'.
I remember we set Saddam up, and he was our. What I know as a fact is because he was the enemy of Iran, and we were pissed at Iran. we backed Saddam Hussein to the hilt as long as he was fighting Iran. And right up until the time we landed, probably about the time we started blowing the hell out of Baghdad, he probably thought he was still on our good graces.
More likely.
Because it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, he always, when everything happened, he always looked to me like a guy who thought, what the hell? I was just doing what you wanted me to. like when you spanked the dog for bringing you the paper. It just didn't. It just didn't seem that he was.
Come on now. We even sent the man to our own terrorism school. We sent him to the School of America, right. Just like Bin Laden. Bin Laden was also in the School of America, and I think Bin Laden's still alive. I really do, because that's the first time I've ever heard of any top 10 terrorists that we've been looking for, that all of a sudden we find him and we drop the body in the ocean. Are you serious?
Yeah, I've always been a little bit suspicious of that.
I've never heard of that happening. But SEAL Team 6 goes in and gets him, and then they drop him in the bottom of the ocean. That reminds me of the Transformers dropping. Yeah. Are you serious?
Well, and what was a month later, that whole SEAL team got blown out of their helicopter went down.
I believe there's a couple of them.
Right. There was like this.
I believe there's a couple of them
or
still.
Delta Force.
I know one of them.
Okay.
Well, I know one of them wrote a book, and then the rest of the team ridiculed him for writing a book, saying it didn't happen that way. So, I mean, here you've got a whole lot of skepticism in that. Now, okay, going back to Germany real quick, 9/11, about 3-4 months after 9/11 happened, I'm on gate guard. I get told, hey, Delta Force has selected you to be on Delta Force. You need to go to this briefing. I'm like, okay, I can't leave my post. I need a relief. Well, I missed my briefing. I have never heard of anyone having so much pull that my sergeant major gets his ass chewed because Sergeant Cooper missed a briefing. But they came back a week later, and my platoon sergeant, who was an E7, came to relieve me of my post so I could go to a Delta Force briefing. I'm like, damn. Okay. Now, a responsible soldier would be doing PT every day, whether they were, on gate guard or not. I hadn't been. Hell no. I'm doing a 24-hour shift on gate, checking for bombs and whatnot. I'm going home, going to bed. I don't have time for PT. So I go to this Delta Force brief. I'm told, yeah, this is classified. You can't talk about it. I didn't sign nothing, so I'm going to talk about it. Delta Force is the premium of the premium, or the primo of the primo. We're talking Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Rangers, NCOs that have been to combat. They get selected for Delta Force. Now, supposedly Delta Force has been disbanded and obsolete. I doubt it. I really do. They always say that, but they keep it behind the scenes. They are actually based out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They have a compound all to themselves. And from what the briefing said, NASCAR teaches their drivers training. They have their selection of 5 different weapons that they can modify. They basically go get a Ranger Rick catalog or any of these tactical catalogs. If they see something they like for their team, they say, hey, I want this, and they get it. There is no uniform. They wear whatever the hell they want as long as that team is all wearing the same thing. They can have beards. They can have long hair. If I'm on a mission with Delta Force and the car breaks down here at home, my wife calls the compound. They come pick up the car and they repair it for you. If my wife gets sick, there's a doctor from the Delta Force team that comes to the house and does house calls. We're talking Delta Force, that's where your budget goes. And Delta Force is the ones that's blowing up shit in other countries that we don't even know about, and you hear about it on the news. In regards to weapons of mass destruction, Christopher, I don't think they existed. It was a lie by Bush for an excuse for us to go over there. because here's the other hot topic that I want to bring up is the fact that right after 9/11, we're looking right at bin Laden. We're looking for bin Laden. And all of a sudden, for no reason at all, the whole focus shifts over Saddam because that was the whole target from the beginning.
Well, there was also that
You still there, Markham?
British report.
I can barely hear you.
Oops, forgot. I'd kick my microphone up out of the way so I could get a drink of water. There was the British, Tony Blair. He pretty much went down in flames over the weapons of mass destruction claim. Seems to me there was a British journalist or undersecretary or something like that. They found him dead under very suspicious circumstances because he told a different narrative about the weapons of mass destruction. I think Saddam had some in that category, and he used, he gassed his own people. I don't think he had enough to. I think he had a few squirreled away here and there, just as what a dictator would want to have as bragging rights to the other dictators. Yeah, I've got sarin gas or whatever, but I don't think he had near what we were led to believe in any way whatsoever.
Oh, and we're going to discuss Cheney and Rumsfeld tripping. Believe me, I despise that son of a bitch. Cheney owns Halliburton, who is the biggest defense contractor or logistical contractor of the military, but Halliburton. Now,
Halliburton.
Yeah. Now, Halliburton owns the supply companies that the military buys from. So to give you an example, in Telfar, that's why soldiers love deploying, because one, the chow halls are huge. We're talking everything from a hot sandwich bar to a dessert bar to oh God, you name it, it's in the chow hall. Now, I can go into the chow hall and get an apple and a drink, and Halliburton gets $13. I go get a full meal, Halliburton gets $13. I go in and get a glass of water, Halliburton gets $13. And yeah, you want to talk about making billions of logistical, yeah. And that all went to Cheney. Cheney was making probably trillions, actually, off war. War makes money.
Yep, always has. Well, that's why you look back, FDR wanted... I've always believed that FDR knew that we were going to have... that the Japanese were going to bomb Pearl Harbor. I don't think he knew it was going to be as bad as it was. But if you look at the logistics of around that point, most of what we had in port was our older stuff. The newer stuff was out there in the Pacific doing maneuvers.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to pull the country out of the Depression, hey, let's go to war. That, we'll be putting everybody to work. And, it works for up to about 10 years after. Because after the war, we had the 50s, which was one of the most prosperous eras in modern history. Of course, you can't sustain that, but it was a nice little kicker while it lasted.
Well, let's go to
like my wife says, war and booze.
Well, it's not. No, it's not. I'm giving you an example. Yeah, it's not just because of the chow. I fully understand that. That's one of the perks. Completely agree. I'm just kind of showing you an example of some of the benefits of going to war, and where the money goes. And yeah. So talking bin Laden.
Meanwhile, our troops they're living in tents.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. They went from tents to chews, which is a civilian housing unit, basically a two-man trailer. Or in some cases, if you're infantry, you're living in a blown-up building in town. And yeah, no, no, Spear. I just wanted to make sure that was aware. Yeah, soldiers don't want to deploy because of just because of chow halls. But
Oh yeah. But
but
they
you
have
do.
it a lot. You look back at the soldiers before other generations who were lucky to have a tent to eat in, and yeah, the chow halls when the modern military, the chow hall situation's a little bit better than that.
No, a whole lot. They're
And
like
so much
1,000.
of it's now it's government contracted. I mean, do they even have mess specialists and army cooks anymore?
A lot of it's gone to contractors. There are still army cooks, but a lot of it's gone to
Okay.
contractors. Oh no, Spirit, keep them in there because if I'm missing something, by all means, bring it up. And just for if you have a question, like on Spaced Out Radio, make sure it's in caps so I catch it because I'm not always looking at the chat screen here. But Bin Laden, okay, so he was a young man during the Storm Time era, and he saw the CIA giving Iraq weapons. And then comes Somalia, where when do you draw the line of when you need to get involved with a foreign country? And to I hear so many conspiracists out there talking about UN convoys and UN this and UN that. You know what? UN is so damn weak. We've had to go bail the UN out of every mission they've been involved with. Desert Storm, well, Kuwait being one of them, Somalia being another,
Yes.
Bosnia being another. I was on standby to go to Bosnia, as a matter of fact. But I had a cool motor sergeant. He's like, "Hey, Specialist Cooper, you had a specialist back then, and our Apache unit was going to Kosovo." He's like, "You've already been to combat twice. Do you want to go to Kosovo?" I'm like, you know what? Not really. He goes, "Hey, all right, Hogarth, pack your shit. You're going to Kosovo." I'm like, okay. But I was on a team that had to get our vehicles ready to roll to Kosovo. So I was more like a push person. Yeah, and I don't know enough about Oliver North. But so you got Bin Laden. Bin Laden sees America going into Somalia where we really didn't belong, other than okay, there was genocide going on. There was gang wars essentially. I mean, more than gangs, they had what's called a technical. If you've seen Black Hawk Down, you know what a technical is. It's a little Toyota pickup with a 50 cal mounted in the back. And so they were basically blowing up their own people. It was a civil war. But here comes America to save the day. So, that left a big Western civilization getting involved again. And here we come into our, if anyone had what's the word I'm looking for? If anyone had reason enough to push a terrorist action on America, it would have been him. So he probably did it, but I think he was pushed to do it by Bush. That's just my opinion on it. Did the government do it? I don't think so, but I think the government allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
Now, we've already talked about, I've got notes of key points I wanted to bring up. And if you want to count the total cost of lives lost, you've got 2,977 that died in 9/11, 6,000 plus that were injured. That doesn't count the PTSD. Between that
and the other long-term health.
Yeah. Iraq and Afghanistan war, you've got over 6,800 as of 2015. That doesn't count the 6,900 contractors. That doesn't count our Allied soldiers that have died. UK, Australia, Canada, all the other militaries that have been involved. It doesn't even count their deaths. We're just talking U.S. deaths alone. So if you want to add all of them up and tie them in with 9/11, that's a lot of death.
Yeah.
As of 2014,
15 years worth.
Yeah. Oh, hands down. And that doesn't count. For those that don't know, we lose 22 veterans in active duty a day to suicide. Actually, I believe it's 22 veterans a day with 2 additional active duty. And that's a day to suicide. That's, one's too many. But you're dealing with a government that really doesn't give a damn, because all the military is a number.
Right. And the more of them die before they can retire, the lower your tab is going to be. I mean, that's cynical as hell, but, the way they're treated the way veterans are treated after they've served, compared to, say, an illegal alien or even a prisoner in the average privately contracted prison. I mean, damn.
Right.
I think veterans, and I'm not a retired veteran. I did one and done because I was a total F up. But, the ones that spent their lives, their 20 or 30 years in, they shouldn't want for anything, and there should be no such thing as a homeless vet.
Oh, not at all. And, for those that don't know, Forest Moon Paranormal's headquarters group is Forest Moon Grove, which we deal with pagans in the military. And it's funny how we get looked at, because we did run a homeless closet for a while, and we actually went to veteran stand-down days and gave out clothes, sleeping bags, that kind of thing. And one of the stand-downs was in the only church in my whole county that takes care of the homeless. And they glared at us because we're a pagan organization. It's like, really? You've got what, over 100 churches in this whole county, and there's one church that handles the homeless, and you're going to glare at us because we're pagan? How hypocritical can you be? And we actually, because we didn't get referrals sent to us because of our belief system, we had to sell, or, not sell, but we lost our storage units full of sleeping bags, clothes, boots, that kind of thing, because we didn't have a budget for it. But we still do handle, for those that know soldiers that are pagan, that are in the military, having issues, let me know, because we work with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation when it comes to discrimination cases. And I could write a book on the way I was treated in Iraq, being a pagan and leading pagan groups in Iraq. And we were actually treated better by Muslims for being pagan than our own soldiers that were Christian. But we're not going to get into religion because that's not the topic tonight. Just an example. So in 2004, actually 2003, towards the end, we got our orders to go to Balad. And are you still there, Markham? All right. I might have to recall him back in. I can hear your mic. I can hear you shuffling around. Say something. I'm right here.
Sounds like we're having our usual broadcasting Skype issue. You got to have one a night, or you're not working out through Skype.
I got you. You're back. Can you hear me? He's talking on that end. Okay.
Okay, I hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, we're having the normal
Oh,
issues
good.
here. Hey, Mary's here. Good deal. Okay, so in
Oh, technology, it's wonderful till it's not.
it is. Well, I'm in the mountains, so my internet is it's here, but it does. Okay, so we're back up. So in 2003, we got orders to go to Iraq. Now I'm in a signal unit from Fort Lewis at this point in time, and basically we have tactical satellite and we run telephones, and it's all in the back of Humvees. They're the metal boxes. We're talking a few million per unit, and our mission was to set up tactical satellite and phones across the battlefield. We actually set up the biggest signal network in U.S. history in Iraq when we got there, because we were the first signal unit into the country. And so we get to Kuwait in January of 2004, and it's funny how things never change. But I step off the airplane. It's about 2-3 in the morning in Doha, and the smell hits you. And hold on a sec. It's our kid's bedtime. Anyway, I can't hit the tweet buffer. No, I don't know how to do that. And are you still here, Markham? Okay. We still outputting.
You there?
Yep, I'm here. Okay, you back? God, I hate technology. All right. So we get into Kuwait, and like I said, yeah, the smell just never leaves. It hadn't changed from 91 to 2004. All right. And anytime you go to a third world country, well, I wouldn't call Kuwait a third world country, but the sewer still runs in the streets. And so we were in Kuwait for about a month, doing basically desert training, drive-by shooting training, believe it or not. And it's funny because the American concept of what they call terrorists is that they are stupid, that their intelligence limit is low, and whatnot. And we got into Kuwait, and we were told that the insurgents were running piano wire across the highways to cut our gunners' heads off. So to counter that, we found steel poles, or kind of like T-posts, and welded them to the brush guards of our Humvees, so that as we're driving down the highway, it'll cut the Okay, that's probably Skype, Markham. Damn it. But yeah, that
Yeah, I figure.
there we go. But yeah, so we had to modify our trucks to counter what the insurgents were doing, and I'm sure many of the Americans out here have heard about IEDs that were in pop cans, IEDs that were in dead animals. IEDs are actually I can't remember the capacity, but very large bombs and whatnot that were placed in cars and parked alongside the roads, and they weren't stupid in their tactics by any means. And when we got there, we in 04 there was no up armored vehicles. Yeah, that's why I figured. Up armored vehicles didn't come out until about 05. 04 we used plywood and rubber mats. Oh, and sandbags on the floorboards. That was our up armor. And about 05 is when they started putting in up armored vehicles. So we did our training for a month. We did the shoot and move training, shooting while you're walking training, drive-by shooting training, all taught by Delta Force and Special Forces retired folks. And after about a month of training, our whole battalion convoyed in 3 days from Kuwait, Doha, Kuwait, into Balad, Iraq. Now, looking at it from the perspective of an Iraqi, we occupied their country. Now, we were on Balad, which was an Air Force base for Saddam. Actually, you saw more of that you saw kids with grenades more in Somalia, Shar. You still had that. All right. Hold on a sec. I'm trying to bring Markham back in. But no, you actually did see. You saw more of the kids involved with Somalia, not so much in Iraq. No, that doesn't say it didn't happen. Just yeah. In Somalia, we had to watch kids that ran up to your trucks and dropped grenades in your trucks. In Somalia, you had to watch for them to try to steal stuff out of your trucks while you're driving down the road. Happened to me numerous times. And what really irritated me was our media, because our media would show, say, a kid with a weapon pointed at him, but what they didn't show you was that kid threw a grenade like 2 seconds before the picture was taken. Same in Iraq. I remember a big case or a big situation where they showed what looked like an unarmed Iraqi getting killed, but what they again didn't show you is that Iraqi shooting soldiers with a machine gun seconds before it. They don't, Shar. They don't. Because how can they train you for that? Are you just going to shoot a random kid that's running up to get a soccer ball from you? No. What you can do is point your weapon at the kid and say, back off, or Sikal Mahayal, which in Somalia means get away. And if they don't respond, then take that chance and shoot. Because you also don't want to be the one that didn't shoot and have them have a grenade. So, it's basically a conscience call. It's basically a common sense call. would say you still got 50% PTSD soldiers that won't go get seen, won't get PTSD diagnosed because of the stigma that is attached to it. And I have had heard rumors where VA will try to confiscate your weapons if you claim PTSD. Nightmares, yes. Some of them were Markham, but you also have to. It helps when you learn the language, and we did learn some of the keywords in Somali anyway. But getting to Iraq, so we had mortars dropped on us almost daily in Balad. And we were there from January 04 to January 05. We had mortars almost daily. And most of the mortars that were dropped, yeah, me too, Spear. And actually, I've only seen one letter that was supposed to have been, I've only seen one letter that was supposedly sent from the VA to another veteran, and it was on internet. And okay, in the chat room, let me know if I'm still live. Just say yes. So are we still broadcasting? All right. So in Balad, Iraq, I would say about 50% of the mortars that were dropped were actually farmers from outside the area that were just pissed off because we're occupying their land, and they were actually real smart about it. They would actually take their mortar tube, drop ice in it, drop the mortar, and go home. They'd be drinking a beer by the time the mortar went off and hit our base, because basically the ice would melt, the mortar would drop, and boom. So it was really hard to capture the ones that were setting the mortars. But they actually nicknamed our base Mortar Alley, which was LSA, Logistical Support Area Anaconda. You could actually Google that on a map too. But yeah, no, okay. Talking about PTSD, yeah, I'm on S-Alexa or S-Citalopram and Buspirone. Those are the two I take. I was on bupropion, but I don't have depression so much, so I stopped taking that one. It gets really irritating because we got back from Iraq in January of 05, and we went back to Iraq November of 05 to October of 06. Now, this is the second combat mission for that particular battalion. That particular battalion, prior to that, had never been to combat other than in World War II. No, I have a dog. I don't need a dog. That's fine. My medication helps. I live in the mountains on a farm. That's therapeutic enough. And that's in that was in response to Shar saying get a dog. I did actually try to get a PTSD dog back in 07, 08. I was denied because my ex had bipolar disorder, and yeah, that's why she's an ex.
God damn it.
But we won't even get into that one. That's I won't even bring up that story. But getting back to Balad, and well, our battalion is getting ready for its third mission, And I was sitting in my company. I was a safety NCO as well as maintenance, and as well as the medic. And so, yeah, I'm looking at the chat room here. Anyway, so I was sitting in my commander's office talking to him, and he saw me as a liability going back to combat for a 5th tour. And so he sent me to the Warrior Transition Battalion because I was close to retirement. He wanted to just send me out and retire, and he actually got himself out of the battalion as well because he was an infantry officer that switched over to signal and didn't like signal, so he wanted to get out of the battalion to go back to infantry. Probably the smartest move he made. He was a really very good commander. But in between tours, so a lot of times you get deployed, and all of a sudden you get picked up as an NCO for either drill sergeant school or recruiting school. Well, I would suck as a recruiter, and I had to go see a psychiatrist to get labeled for to get passed for recruiting. And I actually told that psychiatrist, I'm not going. I'm deploying again. My soldiers need me there, and you're not going to send me to recruiting school. My job is not to bring kids into the Army. My job is to bring them home from war. So basically, they said okay. They dropped me from recruiting school, but apparently I wasn't completely dropped because my battalion commander got a phone call. But I was already in Iraq again, so it didn't matter. Yeah, I agree, Shar. Our soldiers got spit on after Vietnam. And I believe part of the patriotism and part of the treatment they gave us today was because so many felt bad about the way our soldiers were treated in Vietnam. But and for those that have just joined us in the last 15, 20 minutes, yeah, after the show, go back and listen from the beginning. You'll catch up on everything. But, in Blood, we have a lot of female soldiers that got raped in Iraq by one, our own soldiers, two by Iraqis. And there's actually a condition, it's not PTSD, it's MS. What is it? MST, military sexual trauma. And it was so bad in Blood in 0405 that they actually sent a special team from DC, from the DOD, to actually investigate and counsel our female soldiers. And I find it disgusting as hell. I'm sorry, Markham. Yeah, I'll carry on. We'll try to get Skype fixed so that we can get a better. I don't know. I think Skype's a hit and miss because the first hour or so was great. But in Blood, about mid-tour is when actually they found capsules in our breakfast burritos. And I went down to eating 2 to 3 meals a day to eating 1 meal a day. And I pretty much stuck to only cheeseburgers so I could actually see what was in my food. I know that much you don't hear about in the news. There's a lot you don't hear about in the news because they keep a lot hush-hush. And in 05-06, when I was in Telefar, I remember it is probably when my disgust for the country got the worst. They never did disclose what was in it, John. They didn't. I'd never heard whether any soldiers got sick. I never heard of whether any soldiers died from it. We were told not to eat by the locals because their food's not tested. I did have some chicken, and I did actually go to a. We made friends with, and like I said, I ran a pagan group in Iraq called Desert Moon Grove, and in Telfar, we met every night. When I initially started pagan groups, it was to meet once a week, have coffee. No, because we had John, and I'm answering his question about medicating us without a consent. I don't think so. I think, I don't know, I think it was a test by the insurgents to see how far they could get, potentially, because like I said, I don't know of anyone getting sick. I'm thinking. But like I said, that's the point in time where I went to one meal a day, and they actually at that point in time also pulled out any local nationals that were working in our DFAC and refused to let them back on base. The other point I want to bring up is rules of engagement. Rules of engagement changed. Really, they did a polar opposite. In 0405, you found when we were doing missions, convoys, whatever, if you encountered an Iraqi that was setting up an IED, at that point in time, you shot. You took them out. There was no win hearts and minds. It was war. They're seen as a combatant, and you kill them. That's when we actually were allowed to do our damn jobs. So we go back to Fort Lewis, January of 05. We roll back out November of 06, and all of a sudden it's win hearts and minds. You find an Iraqi that's setting up an IED. You do not engage. You detain that person, call in EOD to disable the IED, and then that individual's let go. And basically a slap on the wrist, don't do it again, which, they did. At that point in time is when you saw probably more death on our side, other than the initial, invasion. And that's where the politics gets in the way. And, winning hearts and minds when you're in the military is not the way to win a war. And so 06 in Telfar, I guess prior to 05, 06, Telfar was one of the biggest training hotbeds of the insurgents at that time. Now, Telfar, just so you can get a kind of a geographical picture, was at the corner of Syria, because we could actually see the lights of Syria at night, and Turkey. And like I said, we had great friends that were Turkish special forces that were very curious about what pagans were. They were excited that there were actually someone besides Christians. And because, but being special forces, they kind of knew that anyway. But the Middle East concept of an American is we are all Christian. We are all rich. And even you'll find even a lot of Americans that think soldiers got to be rich because we got real fancy cars. We get paid real well. Yeah, you know how much a soldier gets paid on a 24-hour? We always had a joke, made a quarter for this hour. And yeah, they did try to fix that in that as a mechanic in the Army. My civilian counterparts make about, I don't know, $10 more than you do. And they try to fix that, but I know it didn't, because they don't factor in the fact that we're fixing vehicles in combat. I remember one detail I was on in Balad. We had to actually escort the Porta-John shit trucks because the insurgents were actually attacking the shit trucks. We're talking tankers that pump out Porta-Johns. And so our mission was to escort them off the base so that they could pump out their trucks into the city sewer system. And I remember the day before I was going on R&R, and it's bad juju to be put on a mission, leaving the FOB, leaving the base, the day before you're going to go home in R&R. And so I was really high senses, I guess you could say. And they got done pumping out. And we sat there and waited for the other convoy truck to start rolling. We sat there and we waited. And we waited. And we waited. Well, I told my driver, let's roll up there and see what's going on. Well, they couldn't start their truck. Their starter went out. And about that time, we heard some gunfire off in the distance. Like, oh, this ain't cool. Not the day before I'm going home. Come on now. And I didn't have a tow bar because, well, this was a non-maintenance mission. So I grabbed me a ratchet strap, and that's the first time I ever used a ratchet strap for a tow strap in a pinch. And I told the soldiers in the other truck, we're rolling, we're not stopping, get ready to go. And we haul ass to the next town over. We got back to the gate, and we went straight to the maintenance shop. And yep, interesting times. Interesting times I know civilians never get to hear about. So,
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
You are. I can hear you, but yeah, you need to pick up the volume just a little bit. Speak right into the mic.
I am.
There you are. Actually, let me turn up your mic volume.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
I had about 20 minutes of choppy to no reception here. Now, I remember I had a friend in college who was in the first Gulf War, and he said they would do things like throw canned goods at the, like I said, I wasn't there, so I don't know. But he would say they'd be going down the road, and they would take a can of soup or something and chuck it at the people by the side of the road. I don't know. Did you see anything like that?
What? From our soldiers? Of course.
Yeah.
And you had soldiers. You had soldiers that threw pork MREs out, and of course the Iraqis would run up and they grab the MRE and see it was pork, and they'd start flipping you out. We made enemies. Don't get me wrong at all. You're going to have bad apples, and even not even being a bad apple. When you start hearing about your own buddies getting killed, when you start seeing, being shot at, when you start getting attacked, your mindset goes, you got started late. Your mindset goes from winning hearts and minds, and these people are nice, to, they're the enemy. and you hate them. And bearing in mind, not all of the Iraqis were bad.
Right.
You know that. But, yeah, you start hating all the people. Somalia was probably the worst for me on that regard. I did have Somali friends because I was actually in I had to drive a lieutenant for a while, for a week or two. And I had to go into the city streets of Mogadishu and park outside these compounds on the street because my Bronco or Blazer was too big for their compound. So I would get out of my truck and kind of walk around just to kind of keep eye on my surroundings. So I did make a couple. There was an old Somali man that would always try to sell me the same silver chain with a lion's tooth that was capped in gold for $50. I probably could have got it for $5, but I did try. But yeah, no, you do start hating the people because when they're trying to kill you, you start hating everybody. That's just a fact. I mean, and that's a fact with anything.
Right.
Were there race issues? There probably were in some units, Char, but everyone wears green or everyone wears brown. You saw more anti-religious issues than you did race issues, honestly, from what I saw. I'm sure different soldiers could tell you different things, but race, I didn't see it near, not really. Not in the Army. Now, I can't speak for the Marines. I can't speak for the Navy. Markham could probably explain Navy. I don't know. Did you have race issues in the Navy? Never mind. He's working. Okay. Let's see. I was Army from 89 to 2010. Oh, I'm looking at tripping. Okay. The unit in Afghanistan that was supposed to be going in to get a archaeological, yeah, that was BS. If you looked at the biggest news source that was pushing it was Before It's News, which is a sham site. They have viruses and they don't vet their news. They just push out bullshit news. But I did have a buddy check on that. A buddy of mine checked on that, and there were no missing soldiers in Afghanistan from a supposed archaeological site. So that's the word on that one. I did see that, and I did check that out. But to my knowledge, yeah, there was no missing. And I even saw, if I remember right, I looked at I kind of blew up the picture and saw it was a 10th Mountain patch the soldier was wearing. 10th Mountain was not in Afghanistan at that point in time. 10th Mountain, if you don't know, is at Fort Drum, New York. They go to every mission, pretty much every hot spot. They are a special, and that wasn't a special unit. 10th Mountain is a regular unit. It's just pretty much a highly deploying infantry unit for the most part. They were in Somalia with us. They were in Iraq. They go everywhere. You back yet, Markham? Okay, he's not back. Any more questions before we wrap this up? Because we are going to start wrapping this up. Let's see. We talked about the rules of engagement mindset changing within a few months. We talked about the attitude of America going from highly patriotic to let's bring our boys home. Okay, real quick. Fort Bragg houses special forces. They also they also house Delta Force. Delta Force is actually based on Bragg in a special compound on Bragg. So if you heard about a special unit, it's probably Delta Force they're referring to. Special Forces also has their own compound. Just like on Fort Lewis, we have special areas for the Rangers, special areas for Special Forces. We weren't kicked out. Actually, Obama is one that brought us home. Many of the Iraqis didn't want us to leave because we kept stability there. Now, here's the thing, because everyone blames Obama for ISIL or ISIS, whichever you want to call them. No, actually, Bush started ISIL by sending us to Iraq. If we hadn't even gone to Iraq, there wouldn't be an ISIS right now because we created ISIS. And that kind of goes back to how we treated the people. We actually created terrorists by occupying their country, if you really want to look at it technically. Just like if we had UN coming here and taking over our country, you would hate them. And that would create terrorists here going after the UN or any other foreign country, foreign military. Same thing. We created these terrorists. If I remember right, too, the actual leader of ISIL was in Abu Ghraib. We had him detained. He took his anger and his hatred towards America. He voiced it. He created his own little group, and we released them all. The ones that didn't go to Gitmo, we released. So now you've got them. We pull out of Iraq, and to my knowledge, we do have a few small units that are still in Iraq that are training the Iraqi forces. But even back then, when we were training the Iraqi forces, you still had insurgents that infiltrated into the training. They got free weapons, they got free equipment that I'm sure our government paid for, and then they disappeared. They knew what we were doing. If you go on Forest Moon Paranormal, you'll actually see pictures of us in Iraq. I'll say this, full moons are awesome over there. And it does snow in Iraq. And there are actually John Deere tractors in Iraq. They still do farming in Iraq, just like they did in the biblical days with irrigation ditches, because being in a desert, they have their own irrigation system. Very old school, but very accurate.
Didn't they have a culture that was like on a floodplain at one time? There was a part of it seems to me there was a people in Iraq. There's a marshy area or just like a huge inland shallow sea that these people had been living on since biblical times. Pretty much I think they pretty much drained all the Mesopotamian marshes or something like that.
I did. I don't think I actually. Oh, actually, no. There's no light pollution there. Actually, tripping real quick. Yeah, we actually had burn pits there that you can actually, if you were there and saw the chemicals that we were burning and the garbage, well, quote unquote garbage that we were burning. There were days that it looked like fog, but it was actually black smoke. And there was no EPA. There was no one to, shut that down. So there's actually health conditions that our soldiers came back with from breathing in these burn pit smoke. And there's actually a VA claim that you can put in if you were in those areas at those times. Now, when I was in Desert, Operation Positive Force in Doha, they had us running every morning for PT. They actually had us doing PT in a combat zone. And the smoke was so thick from the burning oil well fires that it looked like fog. And they actually pulled us in to do, I wouldn't call that Gulf War syndrome. I think that was something completely different. But they actually pulled us in one day to see what our oxygen level in our blood was, and it was like 13%. And so they stopped having us do runs in the morning. PT stopped at that point in time, but we'd already been there for about 6 months. There was a point.
Did they try doing carbon monoxides on you guys?
Not to my knowledge, no.
With all that burning?
No.
Okay.
I also remember there was one day we had to wear our mask at our side because Saddam had actually threatened to reattack Kuwait again. I know that didn't hit the news, but there were a couple of different times that Saddam had threatened to come back in, and well, we kept him out.
Right.
All right.
I used to see these pictures of the guys wearing all of that NBC gear with the mask and the hood and all. How long can you wear one of those before the heat just knocks you out? I mean, I've seen those charcoal suits. We had a couple. For some reason, we had a couple at college. We'd got them from a State Depot. I think Dr. Scott thought he was going to use them as some kind of camouflage for us. But anyway, those things are heavy. Heavy and hot without the combat gear on.
It depends. It depends on which model you have. The new ones they've got, actually, you don't even use the hood for the mask anymore because the chemical suit has a hood on it. I think the longest I've actually worn full NBC gear with mask was about 2 hours. And
Jesus.
Yeah, that's we actually did PT in the morning in Germany with full NBC gear on and ran in them. And it actually kept you warm because in Germany, it's 30 degrees, 20 degrees, whatever. It was actually comfortable other than when your mask started slipping. But yeah. Now, I wouldn't want to be wearing an NBC suit in the Middle East because it's hot enough wearing your uniform. Plus,
that's what
it's hot enough just wearing your regular uniform at 120, 130 degrees outside with your vest on with your plates. That's where it starts getting hot. And I think I failed to mention.
Yeah,
they gave us these bulletproof plates that are porcelain, they're bulletproof, believe it or not, porcelain. But in 04-05, we had these plates. In 05-06, they actually got all panicky and they pulled our plates because our plates apparently were defective and they didn't tell us that until, good thing we didn't get shot because it wouldn't have stopped the bullet. And they gave us new plates. Yeah. We're like, really? How are these any better? So, yeah. A lot of things Americans don't know about. And the government's behind it all to me. I love camel packs. I wish I still had mine. I still have a lot of military gear, but I didn't keep my Camelback. Would be great in search and rescue.
I've got a couple of civilian models of those. They're handy.
And it sucks because I used to have my best buddy ran supply, and I was being a mechanic with a medical secondary MOS. I was put in charge of ordering all medical supplies for our signal unit. Because if you don't have a medic, you have what's called a combat lifesaver. Which is funny, because EMTs in the civilian sector cannot stick IVs. But our non-EMT combat lifesavers were IV certified. And that was actually a lifesaver for soldiers in Iraq, because all you need, if you can get an IV stuck, then that's everything. Stop the bleeding, get an IV in, and that saved lives. And of course, tourniquets. And
Right.
it's funny how much the civilian side learns from the military medical. Everything changes based on military medics. And
It really does. As far back as the Civil War.
Exactly. And I mean,
Or the Crimean, for that.
I'm trying to get my EMT certification back for search and rescue, but it's almost a bitch to get into the course because they just keep on sidetracking me. But in all reality, as a combat medic, you are the same skill level as a civilian paramedic, plus, because we're trained in terrorist tactics, we're trained in NBC medical, we're trained in when I was in Kuwait in '91, my chief warrant officer was an 18 Delta, which is a special forces medic, and he's the one who trained us above and beyond. We were actually sticking IVs with night vision goggles on, and things like that. He taught us SF medical stuff, and very cool guy. But it's funny because I'm trying to get paramedic certification, which is a pain on the civilian side, even though I was a paramedic in the military. So any last questions before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I was amazed at how the medical side didn't cross over very well.
No, it doesn't, because even as a combat medic, it's hard to even be, Rhino rockets. Yeah, even as a combat medic, you're lucky to get minimum wage checking vital statistics, vital stats in a clinic. Maybe things have changed.
Right. Like a nurse assistant or whatever.
Right, and our nurses are 91 Charlies, unless that's when I was in Somalia again. 91 Charlies were not IV certified; they were IV monitoring. They simply monitored the IVs, and it was funny because trying to get a 91 Charlie to stick an IV, and no, I don't know how to do it. I'm like, well, God damn it, get out of the way. And yeah. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to wrap it up. We went over a little bit just because of our technical difficulties, and that's fine. And if you're not in Forest Moon, just do a Facebook search, Forest Moon Paranormal, and jump into the group. As I said in the beginning of the show, I am starting a new experimental program where I'm going to get a point of contact in every state. You are going to be responsible for your state as far as case management goes. I need you to look up every paranormal team in your state to get on board. Now, if you need me to screen them, we do not want crackerjack box paranormal groups that are only sitting there looking to get a picture. And that doesn't work for me. You need to know how to clear out spirits, pass them over to the other side, how to mediate with spirits, how to deal with entities, and protection. Those are my key points that every group needs to know if they're a part of our team. But if you're interested, get a hold of me directly, or you can just post on my thread that's in the Forest Moon Paranormal group. Make sure you jump in Spaced Out Radio, which is going on right now, at www.spacedoutradio.com, and you can also find our S4 link in the Spaced Out Radio page. All right, here comes the music. Maybe.